Welcome. I'm Karen Maratz, your host for the evening. While I've been hosting this event for a few years, it's also actually Pro-Choice Minnesota's first gala. While the incredible organization has been rallying and fighting for abortion rights since 1966, this is the first year in recent memory that it exists independent of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Earlier this year, the national organization, NARAL Pro-Choice America, announced their decision to dissolve their affiliate chapters. And so 2 weeks ago, on October 1st, Pro-Choice Minnesota became an unaffiliated independent organization. And while this is our first year as Pro-Choice Minnesota, it is our second year of COVID-19 and virtual galas and me doing this from my dining room. And we've learned so much from this pandemic. We've experienced grief and loss, but we've also learned how to connect in different ways. So while I miss seeing you all in person and I miss the food, I'm simultaneously thrilled to be joined by those across the country. We have people tuning in from California, Oregon, Washington, D.C., obviously all over Minnesota, and my own home state of Florida. It's true, I am a Floridian. I've admitted it. And it means that I can make fun of Florida. You can't, but I can, and I definitely do. But not everything about Florida is funny. I want to share with you the event that radicalized me on abortion access. When I was a senior in high school, an anti-abortion activist stalked and murdered Dr. David Gunn outside of his clinic in Pensacola, which is a pretty conservative part of Florida. Now, Dr. Gunn had specifically chosen to work there, to work in rural areas in order to provide both abortion services and OBGYN care to people who desperately needed access. And his murder was just one and the first of four that took place over the next 15 years. And Dr. Gunn's murder, which was done in the name of preventing future abortions, I understood that it was seen as justified and even necessary by the anti-abortion groups that in fact encouraged it. And when I saw what happened in Texas recently, it reminded me of Dr. Gunn. For those of you unfamiliar, SB 8 makes it illegal to get an abortion after 6 weeks, which is before most people know that they're pregnant. And worse than that, it encourages anyone who suspects that someone else might be seeking an abortion to report that person and sue them. So if you suspect that someone who has literally nothing to do with you might be even seeking an abortion, you should sue them for financial damages to you. And it seems utterly ridiculous. But the state of Texas is encouraging residents to become vigilantes, to turn on their neighbors and even strangers in the name of preventing abortions. And that's the kind of atmosphere and rhetoric that justifies the killing of an abortion doctor. That's how we get the murders like the one of Dr. David Gunn. So we have to fight this. But how? Nationally? In just 6 weeks, the Supreme Court will begin hearing arguments on Dobbs v. Jackson, a case that could gut Roe v. Wade or just overturn it completely. And it's becoming more and more clear that we must fight at the state level for protection. And while I am from Florida, for more than 2 decades, I've called Minnesota home. And I'm so proud that here in Minnesota, we have an organization like Pro-Choice Minnesota who will fight for us, who will fight to keep abortion legal and accessible in Minnesota, not just for Minnesotans, but for everyone who comes here from a place like Texas to seek the healthcare that everyone should have. In my day job, I'm a community organizer, and I truly believe that all of our fights are local. Pro-Choice Minnesota has a proven track record of fighting and winning at the state capitol. They've stopped trap laws, they've elected pro-choice politicians, and they've helped draft legislation. They are fully prepared and ready to protect Minnesota if and when Roe falls. As we ask you for money over the course of the night, and we will, remember everything that Pro-Choice Minnesota does for all of us. Whether they are at clinics or campuses or the Capitol, they are fighting hard to protect our bodily autonomy. And with this new disaffiliation from national and this new independence and this new preparation to fight at the local level, consider doubling last year's gift. It is needed now more than ever. I'm so excited to share these amazing speakers with you. We have advocates, activists, and award-winning author Carmen Maria Machado. I know that you will enjoy this program just as much as I will. And with that, I am thrilled to pass this along to Lucy Jones, who oversaw the campus organizing program last year.
I'm delighted to join you on this special evening to give Pro-Choice Minnesota's third ever Christina Robinson Carberry Award. Christina was an integral part of Pro-Choice Minnesota from 2013 to 2015. She was the leader of the Choice Leadership Institute, an intense 3-day long program that identified and trained young activists within the reproductive freedom movement. She continued to stay active within the program and eventually joined the Pro-Choice Minnesota Foundation board. After her official capacity with Pro-Choice Minnesota ended, her life's path continued to cross professionally with our nonprofit. Christina worked on many election and re-election campaigns and was a legislative assistant at the Capitol. Her life's work is evident that she had a passion for people and for making the world a better place. She believed that fighting for progressive policy change was one of the key ways to improve the health and lives of others. And she didn't just talk about progressive policy change, she did it. She showed up every day to do the hard work. She showed up every day with a commitment to abortion rights advocacy and showed perseverance, dedication, and an intense passion for reproductive freedom. Unfortunately, Christina passed away in 2018, but her legacy carries on. The Christina Robinson Carberry Award recognizes an outstanding pro-choice Minnesota campus organizer. This campus organizer exhibits a commitment to abortion rights advocacy and shows perseverance, dedication, and a deep passion for reproductive freedom, just like Christina. Our campus organizing program is statewide, on 5 campuses, preparing the next generation of reproductive freedom fighters. And this year, Pro-Choice Minnesota is proud to present this award to Cassidy Thompson from the University of Minnesota Duluth. She is truly an outstanding organizer, and we are so lucky to have her in the future of our movement. I am so thrilled to introduce Cassidy.
Thank you, Lucy. I am honored to be accepting this award. I started working as a campus organizer nearly 4 years ago at the University of Minnesota Duluth. In this time, I worked with my club, Student Advocates for Choice, to educate students on fake clinics, the dangers of the Hyde Amendment, and the importance of protecting abortion access right here in Duluth. I also ran the Duluth Clinic Escorting Program, recruiting, training, and organizing volunteers to get patients to their appointments without shame and intimidation from protesters. It's been a wild ride, to say the least. It's been a busy 4 years, but I wouldn't change them for anything. On the ground at clinics and campuses, we directly see how important state work is. Abortion restrictions like the 24-hour waiting period, mandatory parental notification, and a state-mandated script have real effects on people's lives. I've seen them firsthand. While Minnesota is miles better than other states in the upper Midwest, we need advocates here at the Minnesota State Capitol to fight for our rights. And that's Pro-Choice Minnesota. They've been here since 1966, and they'll be here for years to come. Working with Pro-Choice Minnesota has been an amazing experience. I found mentors in the staff, made connections in the reproductive health community, and have learned and grown as a person. I'm thrilled to say I'll be staying close to this movement as I've accepted a job as a patient educator at We Health Clinic. I couldn't have begun my career in abortion care without the resources, staff, and support from Pro-Choice Minnesota. Thank you.
And now I'm honored to introduce Pro-Choice Minnesota's Legislator of the Year, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart. Senator Johnson Stewart flipped a Minnesota Senate seat previously held by an anti-abortion politician. She ran not just as a pro-choice candidate, but one who was openly and proudly pro-abortion and not afraid to talk about it. At the Capitol, she's given impassioned remarks on the floor about why abortion is healthcare and why we must protect it at the state level. Thank you, Senator Johnson Stewart, for your commitment to reproductive freedom.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this award tonight. It means a huge amount to me. What an honor. I was on the NARAL board 10 years ago, and so I'm well aware of the legislators who have gotten this award in the past. I'm humbled to be included in that group, and I'm pleased that you think I'm doing good work. I will continue to do good work for Pro-Choice Minnesota. I ran for Senate because of choice. I was loud and proud about being pro-choice, about being open and honest about the need for abortion care for everybody in Minnesota. And I never shirked from that, and I won't shirk from that. And again, I'm so grateful for your faith, and I'm grateful for your support. So thanks, and I hope to see you in person soon. Bye-bye.
You know, frankly, I ran for Senate so I could stand here and say this. But Senator Howe, thank you, and I couldn't agree more. Life is precious. This woman here birthed 2 babies. I had 2 babies growing here in my uterus. I breastfed for 4 years. 4 years. Please, don't lecture me on how precious life is. I know. I created 2 of them. This is not about how precious life is. It's precious. I treasure my 2 daughters more than anything in the world. And I treasure my grandkids, even though I have no biological connection to them. This is not about how precious life is. We know that. We can agree on that. I pushed those 2 babies out. I was there. So I think I have the higher ground here. By the way, I'm also a Christian, and my faith brought me to this body. Today, we are not talking about that. We are talking about the reasonableness of imposing government regulation on a special kind of facility. That's what we're talking about here with this amendment. So yes, we can agree, life is precious, it's beautiful. I loved every minute of being pregnant twice. I wouldn't say I loved every minute of breastfeeding, but I did enjoy it enough to do it for 4 years. Okay, everybody can be uncomfortable for a few minutes. But the reality is, this is not about the preciousness of life. It is about putting an undue burden on those women who, because they are in charge of their own reproductive choices, and it is legal, as Senator Frenzen so eloquently told us, it is to take those burdens off the primary care providers that help them with their health care decisions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shayla, the Vision Realization Advisor for Our Justice. Last year was the first year of being awarded the Shayla Walker Purpose in Action Award, and I'm in deep gratitude to Pro-Choice Minnesota for the opportunity to announce the next award recipient, Rowan of Spiral Collective and Cocoa Butter Features. Over the past couple of years, there has been a lot of talk about rest, slowing down, self-care, but in reality, I only know a handful of people who actually live it. The fascinating part about Rowan is that even though they go at their own pace, never dictated by urgency, they get so much done. During the pandemic, while leading the logistical abortion support group Spiral, Rowan was still able to redistribute over $75K in funds to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. They were able to open up and run a food shelf that is still being ran till this day, and assemble herbal care kits and distribute them to activists who are on the front line during the uprisings. Every time that Rowan shows up as themselves, it's as if a plant were coming to life, taking the time to dig their roots into the ground and knowing that the role that they play in the story of our liberation. There are times when they don't express themselves with words, just movements and sounds. Yet those movements and sounds are integral to making connections, deepening relationships, and carving out time. Rowan is a big fan of moments of silence, and I'm talking long pauses. But that's just one of the many ways that I see them living out the values of rest and deep listening. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The way that we show up and do the work is just as important as the work itself. Rowan is a true personification of people tapping into purpose. Thank you, Rowan, and congratulations on winning the Shayla Walker Award.
Good evening. I'm Maggie Meyer, the Executive Director of Pro-Choice Minnesota. I've been at Pro-Choice Minnesota for 2 years, and in that time, we've only had to deal with a global pandemic, SB 8 in Texas, June versus Rousseau, losing the pro-choice majority in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and reminder, we don't have a pro-choice majority in the Senate either, the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, and last but not least, the disaffiliation of our organization from NARAL Pro-Choice America. A pretty uneventful couple years, wouldn't you say? In this time, I've learned a lot, that our scrappy team of 6 does a workload of 10, but that it's always worth it to pay a professional accountant. That taking a midday ice cream break is sometimes all you need, but when you can't go door to door, your members will always come through for you. That investing in deep relationships with other organizations doing this work makes the load a little lighter, and that I work with the best team imaginable. So first, I want to thank my team at Pro-Choice Minnesota. We work together so well that we regularly finish each other's sentences or know exactly what someone means by, hey, have you talked to that one guy about the thing? Despite remote working, we've maintained and grown connections to each other and to other organizations, people, and movements. We haven't just maintained our organization during a time of upheaval, we've grown. I'm confident in our ability to take on the challenges 2022 will bring as abortion rights continue to be fought at the state level. As a fully independent organization, we are more prepared than ever. So, a note on our disaffiliation. On June 12, 2021, NARAL Pro-Choice America's Board of Directors approved and released a 5-year strategic roadmap with a plan to dissolve the affiliate relationship with all state entities and replace it with a national top-down structure. The separation of national and affiliates was to take place over about an 18-month period with a 2023 deadline. Then, in an abrupt change on August 20th, 2021, National told us they were terminating our affiliate agreement effective October 1st, 2021. Let me be clear. While this changes our database, our name, and our website, it does not change our goals of protecting and expanding abortion access in Minnesota, nor does it change the strategies by which we plan to achieve them. Realistically, we're looking towards a post-Roe world where the states are the battleground. It's here in Minnesota with our existing organization and deep relationships at the Capitol. With you, our 100,000 plus members, and our coalition partners that will be most impactful and effective at protecting abortion access. Pro-Choice Minnesota has existed for over 50 years, in many iterations, and we will continue to exist doing our current work until reproductive freedom is a reality for everyone, regardless of income or zip code. While these monumental changes have been happening, we've sought changes internally. We've grappled with our racist history, from the pro-choice movement as a whole to our organization and to us as individuals. A big part of our work has been done at Unrestrict Minnesota, a coalition to advance reproductive justice. We're made up of a multiracial coalition of LGBTQ plus advocates, faith communities, clinicians, activists, doctors, abortion funds, lawyers, organizers, healthcare clinics, doulas, podcasts, and more. I'm proud to serve on the leadership committee of Unrestrict. In this role, I bring the expertise from Pro-Choice Minnesota's 50 plus years of leadership, and I listen, learn, and work beside those most acutely affected by reproductive oppression. Our electoral work has expanded too. Not only do we lobby aggressively at the Capitol, but we've pushed more heavily into electoral work. In 2020, we endorsed 113 candidates, engaged more than 50 volunteers, and made thousands of calls in support of our Abortion Out Loud endorsed candidates. And now that they've been elected, we hold them accountable. We firmly believe that our legislators should not just be passively pro-choice, but loudly and proudly pro-abortion. They also cannot only be pro-abortion, but they must be committed to racial justice and understand how racism, police brutality, and white supremacy all play a part in reproductive freedom and justice. Throughout all this, we've continued our crucial programming that Minnesotans rely on. Our campus organizers across the state are educating their campuses on the dangers of fake women's health centers, registering their peers to vote, and growing into the leaders of tomorrow. We've trained more than 600 new clinic escorts who act as a friendly face and a barrier between patients and protesters, helping people access healthcare free from harassment, intimidation, and shame. I believe in the work that we do, and if you do too, I urge you not to only make a gift to support pro-choice Minnesota, but to double it, given, and I hate to say this, the unprecedented times we're in. Thank you.
I'm just so honored to have been asked to be here. If you've attended this event in the past, you know that the reason why I'm here is to ask you for money. So do this for me, just do this, because we think about the cost that Pro-Choice Minnesota is incurring this year that they had no plans for. You know, a new rebrand, a new logo, a new name, new colors, which by the way, so cute. So cute. Have you seen it? So cute. They also had to redo a website with new pages, new voter guide, new forms to recruit volunteers. Those are actually two very big $10,000 projects. So it's the rebrand, the website, two $10,000 projects. So I would love it if tonight we could fully fund both of those projects. And I don't know if you guys know this, but we actually have swag here. So if you donate $100 or more tonight, you can receive this amazing, unapologetically pro-abortion sweatshirt. It's Pro-Choice Minnesota's first ever swag, so you can totally get in on that. Who doesn't love swag? Look at this. Unapologetically pro-abortion sweatshirt. I mean, let's face it, we are all living in sweatshirts. I'm not even actually wearing pants right now. State legislatures are more important than ever. We have to support Pro-Choice Minnesota. Make that donation. Go ahead and hit that donate button and help us continue this fight.
Carmen, it's so wonderful to meet you.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to meet you.
What are you watching?
What am I watching? Oh my God. I am watching. I'm trying, like, sorry, I watched a bunch of stuff recently that I've hated, and I don't want to like just ruin anything. I compile this thing a bit. I'll tell you right now, what's giving me a lot of joy is, and this is very problematic to say, but Law and Order SVU, and then the Law and Order, the Stabler one,
Organized crime.
Organized crime, which is like not a great show, but like I will watch Benson and Stabler do literally anything. So I've been like watching that and really enjoying it. Yeah, I think that's been my most recent. I mean, it's weird because it's like the pandemic kind of broke me a little, like in terms of what I can watch, because I used to be able to watch so many things that I now really just want to watch like comfort shows and then like really gruesome horror. And that's like the only two things I can watch. And nothing comforting. My spouse loves like the Great British Bake Off and like all these like quiet British shows about like repairing teddy bears or whatever. And I'm like, nope. I want to see someone's head getting chopped off with a chainsaw, or I want to watch The Office for the 50th time. You know, it's like those are my two options.
Your writing blends a lot of different genres, right? So there's like horror, gothic, fantasy. How did you come to that place in your writing? How did your voice kind of shape into that?
Yeah, well, I was always one of those kids who loved reading. Like I was one of those kids like walking around with like a book in my face and like running into walls and stuff when I was small. And so I was a really voracious reader and I read a lot of different genres. And as I got older and I began writing, I remember having a lot of thoughts about um, that like non-realism, or genres of sort of horror, fantasy, science fiction, sort of loosely defined, offered me a lot in terms of sort of the mood I wanted to strike or the way I wanted to approach material. So like one of the first short stories that I ever wrote that I consider sort of in my voice, like my contemporary voice as like a professional author, was a short story about sexual violence. And I wanted to tell the story in a way that felt new and fresh. And I was really struggling to figure out like how to do that. And I ended up, using this sort of device in which the protagonist, in sort of in her recovery, realizes she can hear the thoughts of actors in pornographic films. And so it was just this like weird device that like fell outside of the rules of realism that like offered me this like insight and this way into like a very specific question. In the case of that story, it's like regaining a sense of interiority after you've experienced violence. And so for me, those genres just like give me a way in sort of sideways that I find really comfortable and interesting, and I think really help me like help me get to kind of the heart of what I want to get to. And I mean, I also love realism. Like I love all books, and I do write in all modes, and I have written realist stories, but I do just love, especially horror. Like horror offers a lot for me. It's a genre that just makes me really happy.
In Real Women Have Bodies, which I loved, you wrote about a pandemic which slowly renders women's bodies invisible. So how do you relate this to like the current political climate?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like I keep getting asked all these questions about both my pandemic stories in that book, one of which is a very metaphorical pandemic, this pandemic of invisibility, and the other one, which is a literal pandemic and a woman trying to like connect with people through this pandemic, both of which have become really relevant in the last year and a half. And it feels really weird that people are like, I can't believe you wrote that so long ago. And I mean, I think for me, the thing that was really interesting to me about Real Women Have Bodies was this idea that women's bodies as sort of like on a battleground, and the nature of like this idea that like they cannot be trusted, and that like even in their weakness, like there's sort of this part of the story where they talk about how like there's rumors that some of the women are like committing like various kinds of these invisible women, these women who kind of faded away, are kind of getting into like machines like ATMs and voting machines and are like performing their own kind of activism, but people are like suspicious of them, and they're suspicious of like what it means that a woman can be like barely there. And I feel like that combination of like invisibility and being sort of crushed beneath sort of this like societal wheel, but then also being thought of as like powerful and suspicious on like sort of the other side of the coin, like again like feels relevant in ways I feel like I don't even need to explain, like it's just that like women are both like their bodies are forfeit and are constantly like in this sort of nexus of politics, and are just like sort of being treated as these political pawns, but then also we're really suspicious of women's power and really afraid of women's power. And so that to me feels like kind of the essence of the story. Well, one of the pieces of the story. And I think and it's like, I wrote that story a long time ago. Like, I mean, I'm 35 now. Like I wrote that story, the first draft of it probably when I was 24 or 25. So it's like, at this point, it's almost a decade old. And it's weird because I only feel more strongly about that. Like since like, what I mean? Like 10 years ago, I had those feelings when I was like in my early 20s. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I still like, I feel this even more strongly now in my 30s. So
Yeah, I mean, it comes through.
Mhm.
And then your short story, also in that collection, The Husband Stitch, is very well known,
Mhm.
and speaks a lot about bodily autonomy. And for me, as I read it, just this idea that even for people who love you and partner with you, there's still a piece of you that will always need to be owned,
Mhm.
and controlled. So can you talk a little bit about that story? Talk about what inspired it, and what is the feedback like about that story?
At some point I was talking to an aunt of mine who is who worked as a OBGYN nurse, and she was telling me she just told me kind of offhand that there was this expression, the husband stitch, and she was sort of or what a husband stitch was, and she was explaining it, this idea that, you know, sometimes husbands will ask for like extra stitches in their wives' vaginas post childbirth to like create like tightness or whatever. And I was like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And also that phrase is so upsetting. And so I wrote it down because I was just like, that's got to go somewhere. That's a good title, but like, I don't know where. And then, yeah, like years later, I sort of, a couple years after that, like I would just began to like pull the pieces together. And I was like, oh, I feel like I could tell this story about this woman. I could like put her in a, she's not totally contemporary. Like the story sort of set in the loose, like mid-century-ish, but like, you know, I wanted to tell her story. And then I thought like the ribbon, you know, so it was like just sort of a matter of like retelling the story and then thinking about urban legends and thinking about, you know, folk tales and fairy tales and like why we tell the stories we do and what they mean. So like, it just became this like, I don't know. And it was like, yeah, just part, it was just like a thing that I felt really deeply. And I mean, people, it really resonates with people. I mean, I think I don't know if it's true anymore, but for a while, Granta said that it was like the most read, like every year for a while, it was like the most read story on their website. And like, you know, I still get emails and messages about it constantly. Even though the book, you know, at this point, the story is like 6 or 7 years old. And like the book that it's in is like, you know, 4 years old, but like, yeah, people really respond to that story. And I think it is because there is something about, yeah, like what we owe to partners and what we owe, like what women owe to men or what they don't owe to them and the pressures that they feel. And, you know, and I wanted a character who like, you know, she experiences pleasure really acutely. Like I didn't want her to be like prudish. Like I was like, she loves she loves having sex. She loves her life. Like she's got a lot of things going, but there's just this thing that she can't escape, which is this dynamic, this even with this man who otherwise like fulfills her every sort of desire. Like there is something that will eventually destroy her. And she's kind of just following it the whole story. And again, this was a very, very cynical thing to say, but it really was just like something that really felt really correct to me. And I remember like writing the story and feeling like it was important and special. Like when I finished it, I was like, all right, I did this.
Yeah. And I thought it was incredibly poignant that it's almost like the sense of ownership transfers from her husband to her son.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
It's not just her husband and her partner. She creates a young man who then also lays this claim to her body. Yeah. So you've been pretty outspoken about relationship violence, particularly in queer relationships. Can you talk about why you think this is an issue that needs more attention or to be talked about more?
Like when you are fighting for rights, like when you are fighting for the right to, you know, to be a fully fledged member of society, and like there are things that you need, there is a pressure to perform goodness. And so this idea that like, so for example, with queer people, this idea that like, you know, you don't just deserve like full rights and protections because like you're a gay person. It's like you have to be like, we are better parents, we are better partners, like we are better in every way, and therefore we definitely deserve these things. What I'm trying to say in the book is like, that's not true, and also that's okay. Like it's, you know, and I think this is true of like all marginalized communities. It's like there's always people trying to say like we are good, therefore we deserve this thing. And I understand that impulse, and I've like participated in that impulse myself, where it's like we're trying to show that we deserve these things, but ultimately you deserve them because you're a human being, not because like you're like better in some particular way. And then the problem is that when you have those dialogues, when you have people who don't want to like air dirty laundry or talk about negative things, then you end up with people who feel alone because they're like, oh, I experienced this thing, it must be an abnormality, it must be my fault, it must, you know, or they have nowhere to go. And I remember like doing some reading, you know, doing a lot of reading of like historical accounts, and even back when this conversation first began, like in like the 80s, when like, you know, we basically acknowledged domestic violence as a phenomenon in general, the idea that like, because for a while that was like not a thing we taught, like that idea did not exist, right? And then someone was like, oh, this is a phenomenon, it's a thing. But even then, even in like the very, very early days of that conversation, there was this tension between straight women, straight feminists, and queer women and feminists, because straight women were like, oh, because lesbians were like, well, what are we going to do? Because like our abusers can get into women's shelters, you know, like our abusers, like there need to be resources for queer women as well. And the straight women were sort of like, sorry, like you're complicating the issue. Like you're taking away resources from straight women, like just hang back. And so there, even in the very beginning, there was like this place where they split from each other. And so it also just like is a really good illustration of like the way that we, and by we, I just mean women, queer folks, feminists, progressive people, like have like fail each other, you know, in these ways where like we get kind of divided and like end up kind of fighting each other for like really limited resources. So anyway, it was just like it was like really interesting to do all this research, but like super horrifying. And I was like, I feel like there's a lesson to be learned from all of this. And I mean, obviously lots of other books have written about this sort of a similar, not this phenomenon of queer domestic violence, but about this sort of like progressive infighting and like the way that sort of groups get turned against each other, all to the service of ultimately like, you know, abusers and conservatives and like all these other groups, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's, you know, it's like there's a similar thing that happens, I think, with abortion access, you know, just like since that's, you know, this is pro-choice Minnesota, that there has to be like one story about somebody seeking an abortion.
Exactly.
Abortion should be legal and accessible to every single person.
Right.
Like you shouldn't have to prove that you deserve healthcare.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, and that's, I mean, it's a great example where it's like, well, what about this story? What about this story? And it's like, well, if you believe that one person should be able to get it, and it's like the saddest, most like, you know, it's like, you know, sort of sexual assault like that, you know, that it's like, if you believe that, then you should believe that access should be able to everybody. And like, even if someone has, if they're like, even if this is true, and I'm like, yeah, even if that's true, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's exactly the same conversation where it's like, people feel this need to like prove themselves. And I don't
like you have to perform the feelings of seeking an abortion in a specific way.
Exactly. It's like, if you're not, and if like you're not sad about it, then like you've done something wrong. If you're not, right, exactly. So like, there's just all these ways we like to police. I mean, we like to police bodies, we like to police women's bodies, queer bodies, non-binary bodies. Like we really like to police those things. And I mean, by we, I mean society, like in these really intense ways. And it obviously, yeah, manifests in abortion access. It manifests in queer DV. It manifests in all kinds of ways.
Okay. So in most of your stories, you know, one of the things that we're thinking about is the work that we need to do at the state and local level rather than the national level, which relates both to where we are in policy and it relates to where pro-choice Minnesota is, having recently been split off from a national effort and is now working at the state level independently. And in a lot of your stories, your characters are affected by these like small traumas every day. That tend to like build up into a bigger picture. And so for me, that relates to like these small pieces of local work that together can shift big things. But like, how do you think about the importance of doing things like locally versus on this big scale?
I mean, it is so important that I feel like I cannot overstate how important it is. And I feel like it manifests in this way for me where like, I feel extremely cynical about big picture political stuff right now. When I think about climate, when I think about abortion access, when I think about queer rights and trans rights, when I think about like all of it, poverty and the pandemic, I feel so helpless and overwhelmed and really, really cynical. And even, I mean, like, I remember, like, I mean, post-Trump being elected, but pre-pandemic, like, I did an event and I said, I must have seemed really, really upset because afterwards a woman came up to me and she was like, I just want to make sure that you're okay. And I was like, I'm okay, I'm fine. I'm just very cynical. Like, I'm just, you know, I'm a millennial, whatever. Like, I feel like I'm watching the world kind of crash in slow motion and it's very scary. And so in that, but also I'm like, on that same note, like I feel like all we can do is like work on local and individual scales, because it's like that is the thing that we can affect as like individual people and like individual communities. Like that's the work that has to be done. And obviously there's like a lot of stuff to be said on like federal and national, international, like that sort of scale and scope. But like I feel, for me, it feels like when you think about, you know, you think about the whole thing, it's like too big, right? And it's like impossible, you know. But there's like if there's like one thing you can do or hang on to, like one piece of activism you can do, or like one, even just like donating money or like being present or like being someone's ride or like, you know, whatever it is that you need to be, like it is so important on like an individual and a local level.
I'm Naomi Silber. I'm the development director for Pro-Choice Minnesota, and I love reality TV, particularly the Real Housewives franchise. Something that the Real Housewives have taught me is that each state is different, and that's just as true with reproductive freedom. Each state has individualized needs and a unique political climate. This is why statewide work is so important. What works in California won't work in Texas or Massachusetts or Minnesota. And national law can only go so far. Roe v. Wade is one of the most well-known Supreme Court decisions in United States history, but I think some of its key meanings often get lost. First of all, abortion was legal in many states pre-Roe. The Supreme Court case made it so that no state could make it illegal, which came under our right to privacy. States could offer better protection, but not worse, than the national standard given under Roe. So when a state introduces a law restricting abortion, it often goes to the Supreme Court for them to decide if it infringes on the rights Roe promises. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, another famous Supreme Court decision regarding abortion, decided in 1992, came about because of a new collection of abortion restrictions in Pennsylvania. The case decided that abortion bans are legal, so long as they provide more benefit than burden to people seeking abortions. This is where we get the undue burden framework. And anti-abortion extremists have been pushing against the undue burden guidelines for a while now, but they've never succeeded so far as in the Texas ban of SB 8. We know we cannot rely on the Supreme Court or national law to protect us, which again brings me back to the housewives and how different each state is. By the way, did any of you catch the first of the 4-part Beverly Hills reunion last night? I didn't because I've been prepping for this gala, but I'm very excited to catch up on it. So statewide differences. We have to work on a state-by-state system. We know what Minnesota needs, not the political pundits in DC. But a big shout out to my family watching from DC right now. We have relationships at the state capitol. We have the 50 plus years of experience, and we know our state. We need to make laws at the local level to protect abortion. No abortion bans can rise to the Supreme Court to challenge Roe if they never get made. And Minnesota has been a haven for abortion for a while now, and it will be for many years to come. I'm confident in Pro-Choice Minnesota to lead that fight for freedom, but we can only do it with your support. I'll leave you with this. An average abortion in Minnesota costs around $650. If you had to have an abortion this week, could you pay for it without adversely affecting your life in any way, without changing your quality of life? Can you pay for it without affecting your housing or transportation or food or even your fun? If yes, please donate it tonight. You've already admitted to yourself that you can give $650 without adversely impacting your life. So donate it to make other lives better. And again, back to Real Housewives, if Tom Girardi can put an illegal $20 million into Erica Jane's bank account, you can donate $650 tonight. Just please do it legally using our link. Thank you so much for your support, for your time, and for your donation.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know that so much work went into planning this and bringing us together virtually for a second year. So let's all send some appreciation to the staff and the board and to our award winners, presenters, and to the amazing Carmen Maria Machado. If you haven't already donated, you still can. If you have already donated, maybe you want to do it again to get a head start on next year's gala. So much work lies ahead to protect abortion access in Minnesota, and Pro-Choice Minnesota will be here to lead us. Thank you for supporting this crucial work, and thank you for being a partner in it. Have a wonderful night. Get out of my dining room. Good night.